Hi Ray, I'd like to talk about the footer styling if I could. I think it's probably better in a video to talk about the changes that need to happen as I responsibly move the page. To start with the desktop size, could we get the spacing in between each element the same, even in between the buttons? If the size of all horizontal elements could be the same, that would be great. Obviously, the elements would also need to be vertically centered as well. They've all got varying heights at the moment. That's kind of it for desktop. I'll move into now other sizes. So as it shrinks, I think it does, these buttons do shift over a little bit early. I think that they could be side by side for a little bit longer and the spacings could compress a little bit. Obviously, once it starts to get down to here, the buttons would need to stack on top of each other as they do. What tends to happen though is the Discover Australia graphic starts to scale down because of its container is forcing it to go smaller. What I would like to happen, if possible, is for these two containers to potentially take up less space so that they were more right aligned. So this block here would be over here, the text here would be over here, allowing the Discover Australia to still be as big as possible and not scaling down as it does, so that if, for instance, here the Discover Australia would potentially be about this big because these elements would have moved over. If we can introduce a small amount of space in between the two buttons, that would be great. You could even, no, that will probably do. The buttons being the same size will be fine. The next item to talk about is there seems to be a transition around about the 770 mark. So at this size, these elements, well, particularly this element here, I think it's all starting to get too narrow at around about the 770 and below level. So rather than doing this size at all, I think it would probably be best just to go straight to this size and potentially introducing some padding on either side of the Discover Australia, because at the moment it's potentially much bigger than what these elements are. These elements just need to be center aligned, a little bit of space in between there, but this is quite huge. So if you could imagine that was still happening at even this larger size here, if some padding could be introduced on either side so the Discover Australia was not so big, I think that would do for this entire range as it's going smaller. See, around about there, that's starting to look better. All the elements are starting to look, the proportions are better. I think a little bit of space may be introduced at the top here, certainly less space here in between these two elements. Everything's center aligned. Moving, that's looking fine, just the vertical alignments, once again, a little bit of spacing in between there. And then we stack on top of each other. I think that's fine. Potentially this text might be able to go out wider. I'm not sure if what's it doing. seems to have a lot of padding on either side of it. If it could come out a little bit wider, that would be fine. A little bit of space in between the two buttons, center align the buttons. Yeah, and even that's fine. I don't mind the proportions of everything. Maybe the text a little bit smaller, and the buttons center aligned. So hopefully that's a snapshot of where I see the footer going in terms of the styling. As mentioned, I had a little bit of a look at it, but there's some margins and paddings and divs that sort of make it a bit too complicated for me to try, and I don't even know if I would be able to do it. So hopefully you can have a go at this, Ray. Let me know your thoughts. Thanks so much.